Okay, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well and keeping safe. This week, I want to talk about signposting, how to make transitions between your slides go smoothly, the language that you need to know. You can have a great presentation, but if there's no structure, if there's no kind of, if you're not leading the audience through the presentation, then it can become confusing, maybe chaotic. The audience might lose interest, and your presentation would end in disaster. So I'm going to show you parts of a video where the two presenters show you, or at least give you some really good examples. They provide you the examples of the language, the phrases that you could use in your presentation to make it more effective. So I'm going to get into it right now. I'll probably stop it and start it time to time, make my own comments. But anyways, hopefully it will be very useful to you.
There's a famous quote about making presentations. Tell the audience what you're going to say it, and then tell them what you've said. Have you heard this before? Do you know who said it? This comes from Dale Carnegie, a very successful American salesman and writer. He lived a long time ago, but his advice is still relevant today. So here's a question. What does the quote mean?
It means that your presentation shouldn't just give information. You also need to show people how your information is organized. To do this, you need signposting language. Let me give you an example to explain. Imagine you go to a website. The website is full of really useful, interesting information, but the information is all on one page. There's no organization, and you have to scroll up and down this huge page trying to find what you need. Would you stay on that website? Probably not. You'd find a website which made it easier for you to find the information you needed. What's the point here?
The point is that having interesting or relevant information is not enough. How you structure and organize your information is equally important. If you don't structure your presentation clearly, people won't pay attention. Just like you won't stay on a website if you can't find the information you want. So how can you do this? You use signposting language. This means using words and phrases to show the audience where your points begin and end, to show what's coming next, and to remind them about things you talked about before.
For example, okay, that covers the new policies. Next, I'd like to move on and discuss what these policies mean to you.
Okay, so you might have noticed here that it's talking about policies like politika or zmluvy or things like that. Okay, so that's more of a business English rather than academic English. But nevertheless, napriek tomu, it's the language, the signposting language for both businesses and for scientific presentations are relatively the same, okay? So it can be applied for not just into science or business, but even in other presentations.
Or, now that you've heard a bit about what not to do, let's focus on positive advice to help you be more effective salespeople and close more of your leads.
Okay, so you can see the signposting language here then, okay? So that covers the new policies. Next, here's the signposting language. Or in this case, now you've heard a bit about what not to do. So let's focus on positive advice, to help you be more, effective and so on. Okay, so that is the signposting language, okay? So it's, you're telling the audience, you're telling the listener what they're going to hear next. What is the next thing, okay?
When you say something like this, you aren't giving people information about the topic of your presentation. Instead, you're showing people where you are and where you're going next. It's a kind of signpost. You don't need signposts to travel from one place to another, but they can make it easier. What else can you use signposting language for?
You can use signposting language to move from one point to the next. For example, next, I'd like to talk about. Let's move on and discuss. Or, at this point, I'd like to turn to.
You can use signposting language to add detail to an idea. Let me go into some more detail about. Let's examine in more depth. Or, I'd like to elaborate on.
You can use signposting language to show that you've finished your main points and you've reached your conclusion. To wrap up, let's remind ourselves of why this should matter to everyone here.
That's a very important one, okay? I like that, to wrap up, okay? Even the title has it there, okay? So to summarize everything, to close everything, okay? It's an expression that's used in English, to wrap up, like zabalit, okay? We're going to finish now.
Let's review the key points from this session. So, you've heard what I have to say. What conclusions can you take away from this?
This is also something a little bit controversial, but I support it. I think it's great to even end your presentation with a question, okay? Because it's still open. It still leaves the audience thinking about things.
If you have an important presentation in English, practice using signposting language. Use signposting language to move between points to show when you're giving a summary or going into more detail, and to signal that you've reached your conclusion. Okay, but things don't always go so smoothly in real life.
Okay, she's going to describe some problems that come up, okay? And she's going to give you some tips so that you don't feel like you're stuck in your presentations. So she's going to help you, overcome, like prekonat, find solutions to some problems that might happen in your presentation.
We know that. Let's look at some advice and language for dealing with problems during your presentation.
Imagine you're making your presentation in English. What could go wrong? What problems could you have? There are many common problems. You might forget where you were or forget an important word. You might realize that you said something wrong or you didn't explain something clearly. You might forget to mention something important. Or someone might ask you an awkward question which you have no idea how to answer. Of course, there are other possibilities. Let's think about these problems. What can you do? And more importantly, what can you say in these situations?
First of all, it's a good idea to make a cue card with key points as well as any important vocabulary you need.
Okay, so I've covered some of this. I think I went through it a bit in maybe the last time we met during the course. So it's always good to have somebody, to bring a friend with you, okay, like a shepkar, somebody who's going to, whisper the word if you forget it. The lady here is talking about a cue card, okay? So just a piece of paper, have several pieces of paper, okay? And put the main points, even the vocabulary that might be very difficult for you. Sometimes there's a word that is very difficult for you to even say or to pronounce in English. And so it's good to have it written down on the piece of paper. You can look at the piece of paper and read it, very quickly and say it correctly.
If you lose your place or you forget a word, it could help. However, you can't prepare for everything. So it's useful to learn some phrases to deal with problems smoothly. If you lose your place and can't remember what to say next, you can use a filler phrase, like, where was I? So, what was I saying? What's the word in English again?
Okay, these filler phrases are very helpful because you're actually inviting the audience to help you. Okay, so somebody will, tell you, oh, well, we were discussing this. Okay, and so it helps you get your thoughts in order, so you can think clearly, and it's basically to get on the track.
If you still can't remember, look at your cue card with your main points. Of course, forgetting something isn't ideal, but if you do, it's better to keep talking rather than just standing there in silence. What if you make a mistake, or you realize that you didn't explain something well?
You could say, let me rephrase that. Actually, what I meant to say is, to clarify, I wanted to say that. In this way, you can correct yourself without admitting that you made a mistake.
Yeah, very, very important to, because you don't want to make mistakes. It's important to say that you don't know the answer to the question, but if you give wrong information and you realize it, then it's important to correct it, to napravit.
What if you realize that you forgot to mention something important?
Use a phrase like this. Let me just add one more thing. I'd like to add something to a point we discussed earlier. Let me return to an earlier point briefly. Again, this allows you to correct your mistake in a confident way so you look like you're in control. Finally, what do you do if someone asks you a difficult question which you can't answer?
You have a few options. First, you can delay giving an answer. For example, I've allocated time for questions at the end of this session, so we'll address your idea later. Or, I'm not in a position to answer that right now, but I'll get back to you later this week. This gives you time to think of an answer and do some research if you have to.
Next, you can deflect the question by asking a question back, or maybe by asking other audience members what they think. For example, that's an interesting question. Before I answer, I'd like to know, what's your take on this? Or, you've raised an important point there. What does everyone else think about this?
Finally, if the question is irrelevant, you can dismiss the question and move on. For example, thanks for your input, but I don't see how that's connected to what I'm saying. I don't mean to be blunt, but I don't think that's relevant to today's discussion. Notice how you can use phrases like, thanks for your input, but, or, I don't mean to be blunt, but, to make your language more indirect and polite. So, for dealing with difficult questions, just remember the 3 Ds. Delay, deflect, dismiss.
Finally, we want to ask you something. Do you have any advice for giving good presentations in English or any language? We'd love to hear your idea.
Okay, I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so hopefully some of that signposting will be helpful to you. Also that stuff at the end, I forgot that they had discussed how to deal with difficult questions and so on. So even the language that they provided there can also be really, really helpful. Okay, so I'm going to send along with this video link, I have a 2 pages of just language that's in PDF format that you can use when you make your presentation. And I just want to say thank you for all of those people who have already sent me your presentation. It's just amazing. Like some of you guys are really professional. I'm really, really impressed by it. Okay, so as I said, I think tomorrow is the end date, April 30th. Yeah, so Friday is already May 1st. So if you haven't submitted a presentation by then, just send me an email. Just tell them, just let me know what your circumstances are, and we'll decide on another deadline for you, or for whatever reason. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for watching this video. Take care of yourselves, guys, and we'll see you next time then. Bye bye.